It is the supreme tragedy of our age that we are not the solitary inhabitants of this cold indifference galaxy. By the divine mandate of the Golden Throne, we are the rightful inheritors of the stars, forged for man alone. Yet, dearest listeners, the void remains infested. The Great Crusade was a storm of purification. During that golden age of reclamation, as we ascended from the ashes of the Age of Strife, entire species were put to the torch in a glorious genocide. But there are many creatures that still lurk in the fringes. Beyond the reach of the God Emperor's light, where the holy pulse of the Astronomicon fades into a wavering ember of hope, the dregs of the galaxy still stir. Scattered across the lightless fringes, the Demiurge, the Luxatl, and the Nicassar persist like vermin in the floorboards of a cathedral. While their numbers are, by the grace of the throne, insufficient to topple our dominance, their very existence is a festering wound upon the purity of the Emperor's realm. That they breathe at all is a disconcerting failure of our vigil. Then there are those who possess the nerve to remember a time before us, the Eldari, an insufferable dying race of vagabonds who cling to the ghosts of their shattered empire. They are a people of such staggering narcissism that they would see 100 imperial sectors consigned to the pyre and billions of loyal souls extinguished, merely to extend the life of a single one of their kin by a solitary heartbeat. Yet I must tread carefully with my ink. In these shallow centuries, the purity of our hatred has been compromised by the desperation of survival. The old adage has been twisted. The enemy of my enemy is no longer another enemy, but now a friend. If our Lord Admirals or Lord Militants, or even the Lord Regent, the avenging sun returned, now deign to treat with such Xenos filth, then these are indeed the darkest of times. Yet there exists a horror that predates the very birth of our sun. Blasphemy so profound that they defy the natural laws of life and decay. Beneath the foundations of our most sacred hive cities, worlds that we have terraformed into mankind's habitat of toxic wastelands, more ancient rock dwells. Deep within the marrow of planetary crusts on worlds uncounted, shielded by layers of adamantium and Promethean polluted terrain, lie the tomb vaults of those who thought to outweigh time itself. The Necrons. They are the undead personified, metallic husks devoid of a soul, cold mechanisms animated by malice that existed before man first crawled from the primordial slime on Holy Terra. They assumed that they could slumber through the troubled years of their waning epoch, waiting for the galaxy to ripen for their harvest once more. Yet, even as we look inwards to the rot of the Xenos and downward towards the stirring of the tomb, we must cast our eyes to the great void beyond. There in the freezing silence between galaxies, a nightmare of biological hunger has coalesced, the Tyranids. They do not come to conquer or to reclaim, nor even to hate. They come to consume. To these shadow-casting swarms, our glorious Imperium is but a larder. 1 billion-souled worlds are merely calories to be harvested. They assail us from every vector, breaching the galactic plane from above and below, enveloping our realm in a suffocating shroud of chitin and claw. Yet, all of these mentioned, each and every one of the foul Xenos, can be purged from a world. Some take considerably more effort than others, granted. There is one Xenos that we can never be rid of. If all the other Xenos across the voids were eradicated, and humanity regained its long-forgotten peak, this infestation would still persist. I am, of course, talking about the subject of my next penned work, the great fungal infection upon our galaxy, the Greentide of the Orks. Of all the blasphemies that beset the Emperor's realm, none are so persistent, so mindless, or so brutally physical as the Ork. They are not merely a race, they are a biological catastrophe, sprawling green cancer that feeds on the very concept of conflict. For those unfortunate enough to stand before the Ork, you'll notice a few things before your inevitable and painful demise. They are a mockery of the human form, twisted into a shape designed for no purpose other than the slaughter. They are massive slab-bound brutes, Their frames possessed a terrifying density. Though they lope with a hunched bestial gait, with their long ape-like arms nearly scraping the dust, should one ever truly stand straight, he would tower over a man of the guard like a monolith of meat and malice. I should note here, dearest listeners, these details are not first-hand accounts. I have no wish to leave my scriptorum for long periods, and travelling to a war zone to simply see these beasts first-hand holds no interest over me. Instead, I have gathered battle reports from the regiments currently stationed across my homeworld, along with various autopsy reports requested from the xenobiologists of the cult Mechanicus. On the documents provided, it states the blood of an orc is a surprisingly dark turgid red, considering the green hue of the foul Xenos. Yet it contains the taint of the fungal symbiosis that defines them. It is this unholy biology that grants them the resilience that defies the lex medicum. The green hue itself comes from the chlorophyll within their toughened hide. This has stunned members of the Mechanicus, who study and are aware of such things, that these vile Xeno have the ability to use photosynthesis and use the light from any sun as an energy source. This is down to the orc being a profane union of the two disparate lineages, genetically fused into a singular self-sustaining engine of war. One strain is animalistic, providing the brute muscle and the predatory instinct and the violent will. The other is a pervasive funganoid organism that saturates every inch of their biology. Even their epidermal layer is less a skin and more reinforced biological armour. Thick as a flat jacket and textured like a grox. Beneath this verdant surface, the fungal filaments weave a microscopic lattice that reinforces the cellular structure, allowing the creature to shrug off small arms fire that would liquefy any human organ. It is a terrifying realization that the very skin we attempt to pierce is a living, breathing shield, thriving on the minerals of the soil and the radiation of the stars alike. The deeper one delves into the genetic labyrinth of the green skin, the more one encounters a horror that transcends mere evolution. To the trained eye of the xenobiologists, the orcoid is not a product of nature's slow, stumbling path, but a creature born of artificial malice. It is a horrific melding of two disparate biological legacies, the aforementioned animal and fungal. They are fused together with a precision that suggests a grand, terrible design. This has led to the inescapable conclusion that the orc is not a civilization in any sense we recognise, but a manufactured race, a purpose-built, self-contained virus unleashed upon the galaxy by some forgotten progenitor, to act as a permanent, self-replicating weapon of mass destruction. This hypothesis finds its most chilling renaissance not within our own imperial data slates, but in the fragmented, flowery fairy tales of the Eldari. Their myths speak of an epoch known as the War in Heaven, a conflict of such magnitude that it makes our current struggles appear as mere skirmishes in the dust. It is said that the Orks were engineered during this primordial nightmare by a race of architects known as the Old Ones. Even the Orks themselves, in half-forgotten legends, whisper of the Brainboys, a caste of creators who supposedly imbued the greenskins with their innate knowledge of war and technology before vanishing into the mists of antiquity. If these legends hold a kernel of truth, then the Ork is a biological time bomb, programmed eons ago to ensure the galaxy would never know peace. They are a legacy of a war that should have ended before the first human looked upon the stars. Yet they endure, carrying the martial instructions of their Brainboys in every strand of their corrupted DNA. The full history of this war in heaven, a time of gods and monsters, is a darkness that will require its own dedicated chronicle, provided the Inquisition sees fit to unseal the forbidden archives I have requested. On investigating the Ork physiology further, it has been noted that they feel pain only as a distant annoyance, the nervous system being as blunted as their very nature. They have been known to endure the loss of limbs, the bisection of their torsos, or even decapitation, only to continue swinging their axes for precious, lethal moments after death should have claimed them. These are no mere race of savages. They are a sentient contagion, the fungus that feeds the animal, and the animal protects the fungi. It is a closed loop of survival that makes the Orkoid threat almost impossible to truly excise from a world once the first spore has taken root. They are the ultimate biological weapon, one that heals itself, recreates itself, and thrives on the very attempts to destroy it. The secret to this terrifying proliferation lies in their foul reproductive system, a cycle of life that turns every battlefield into a nursery for further slaughter. Indeed, to kill the thing is to only spread its spores further and ensure they take the land once more. The Ork have no reproductive organs of any kind. Instead, they use their aforementioned fungal DNA to carry spores that they continuously shed throughout their wretched life, and on death, yield dispersed en masse. These spores drift into the soil, gestating in the dark, underground wombs that nourish the developing abominations. This is the foundation of the Orkoid ecosystem, a tiered emergence of life designed to build a civilization of war from nothingness. The first organism in this blight to emerge is the mindless biting Squigs. He's basically a digestive tract given legs and a singular murderous purpose. They are little more than spherical knots of corded muscle and jagged fangs, driven by a hunger that mirrors the warp itself. These beasts serve as a living, breathing form of logistics for the Greentide. The depravity of their utility knows no bounds. Depending on the strain gestated, a squig may serve as a source of protein, a living suture for a Painboy's butchery, a mobile explosive charge when enough explosives are crammed into its gaping maw, or even a parasitic vanity piece for a preening war boss. They are the ultimate scavengers of the stars, ensuring that, even upon the most desolate, irradiated rock, the Ork possesses a self-replenishing larder to fuel the Orkoid system. Next to develop, once an area has been saturated, are the Snotlings. These represent the most pitiful yet perversely essential tier of the greenskin hierarchy. These mewling diminutive runts are the primary custodians of the growing fungal blooms, navigating the damp gestation pits to ensure the right environment is maintained for their kin. They possess a frantic nervous energy and a primitive intellect that borders on the animalistic, yet they are the very glue that binds the Orkoid ecosystem together in its infancy. To the war boss, they are beneath even the lowliest of slaves, mere distractions to be kicked aside or, in more technologically deprived warbands, utilised as living ammunition and simply hurled at the enemy, the terrifying Snotling biting and clawing at anything unlucky enough to be near its landing zone. But these things should not be taken lightly. They are the heralds of the Greentide, the tiny scurrying shadow that signals the greenskin rot has taken deep root within the world's soil. Soon after, the cunning spindling Gretchens, or Grots in the vulgar tongue of the beasts, stand as the primary architects of the greenskins' ramshackled industry. Spindly craven and possessed of a low malicious cunning, they are the wretched middle child of the Orkid caste. While the Snotlings tend to the soil and the Orks seek the glory of the slaughter, the Gretchen is the engine of labour that facilitates both. Yet, for all their technical necessity, their lives are worth less than the rusted scraps they hoard. They are a race defined by a cowed, shivering subservience, existing only to be used as shields, living mine detectors, or a convenient target for a war boss's frustration. Finally, the Ork warrior himself will emerge into a world already prepared for them, with food, slaves and shelter. Thus the Orks carry his entire world with him. They do not require supply lines or logistics. They are instead a moving, self-replicating plague that feeds upon the very ground it taints. This symbiotic rot is a secret of their terrifying vitality. While the animal cells carry only the blueprint of the individual brute, it is the fungoid component that serves as a living library of damnation. Within the fungal spores lies the encoded information for the entirety of the Orkoid species. It contains the blueprint for every subspecies, from the aforementioned diminutive nagging grot to the looming squig. It has also formed the very structure of their society, enforcing a rigid caste system. Across the entire breadth of our Imperium, from the light of the solar core to the chilling darkness of the eastern fringe, every greenskin infestation encountered follows this preordained evolutionary script with a terrifying clockwork precision. No matter the atmospheric conditions of the world, nor the specific segmentum in which it rots, The Orkoid defaults remain immutable. They do not learn these roles, nor do they negotiate their social strata. They simply manifest them. This rigid caste system is a genetic inevitability, biological mandate written into their very marrow that allows for little to no deviance. Whether it be in the toxic sumps of an industrial hive world or the virgin forest of a distant exodite moon, the sequence remains constant. The fungus thrives, the runtons scurry, the labour is organised, and eventually the warrior ascends. At certain predetermined points, as the orcs gather, as they usually do, the so-called odd boys will emerge. A random orc in gestation will be given the ability to unlock its genetic memory and simply know things. It is a biological memory that ensures that wherever the orc is, and whatever the situation they are in, they have the means to survive. To ensure that survival, the docs or Painboys emerge. These are the grisly surgeons responsible for fixing injuries that even the orcs' prodigious regenerative powers cannot overcome. Though it has been noted by scouts of the Astartes, the orcs themselves are reluctant to seek such medical help. Armed with stabby bits, they perform horrific experimental procedures. It is a common terror among the wounded to find themselves subject to a heavy blow to the cranium, only to wake up with a Squigs brain implanted into their skulls or a mechanical limb attached to the wrong socket. Yet such is the resilience of these foul creatures that they frequently survive these encounters, ready to fight once more. Working in a blasphemous tandem with the docs are the Mechboys. These are the engineers caste, another source of the orcs' ramshackle technology. From the simplest shooters to the most gargantuan walkers, the Mechboys possess an innate ability to look at a pile of junk and imagine something more. And they have the uncanny ability to actually make it happen. Then there are the orc psyker equivalent. While other races fear the warp, the so-called weird boys channel the raw bellicose energy of its own kind. The power of the Waaagh, which I will reference as the Gestalt Field from here on, to prevent having to debase myself with their language any more than I'm having to in this chronicle already. These weird boys are the living lightning rods of the psychic resonance of the mob. If a weird boy absorbs too much of this collective aggression, the results are catastrophic. His head may literally detonate, causing a chain reaction of exploding skulls among the nearby orcs. Despite this danger, war bosses drag these warp heads to the front lines, for the weird boy can gout torrents of green flame and bolts of emerald lightning that liquefy the most hardened ceramite. The social strata of the green skin is further supported by specialised castes that manage the lesser orcoid forms. Runt herds who manage the slaves and the lesser of their kin, herders who manage the squigs, and wild boys who have descended back into a tribal nature. For the base of their wretched existence, the green skin is a creature of pure feral instinct. Upon emerging from their subterranean gestation, they are little more than primitive savages, possessing only the most basic ancestral knowledge encoded in the fungal marrow. They survive initially using the primitive implements provided by their self-contained ecosystem, obsidian edge axes and bone-shod spears. To these brutes, violence is no mere tool or policy or means to an end. It is a biological necessity, as vital to their constitution as the corpse starch and water rations are to the common citizen of the Imperium. In their natural state, they are fractured and chaotic, prone to petty infighting and aimless piratical raids that flicker like bushfires across the fringes of our sectors. These conflicts are localised, random outbursts of looting that represent the orc at his most based form. What begins as a frantic spark of violence soon becomes a roaring conflagration. If this momentum is permitted to continue unchecked, the orcs acquire the critical mass necessary to launch raids upon civilised outposts. Every piece of plundered tech, every shard of sanctified imperial machinery is stripped and repurposed into their bits, the building blocks of an increasingly sophisticated and terrifying arsenal. The orc do not vote, nor do they inherit titles. They simply recognise the bigger specimen amongst them through a psychic gravity that demands total subservience. As more of them congregate, the Gestalt Field grows in potency, fueled by the orc psyche, until the tipping point is reached. As their numbers swell, and the psychic resonance of the mob intensifies, the true horror of their biology begins to manifest. The caste system is triggered. The Mechboys and the Docks find their hands guided by an instinctive mechanical madness. They begin to refine the primitive tools of their kin, fashioning the first forms of more advanced weaponry from cobbled-together parts and grafting unrefined bionic iron into those wounded in tribal skirmishes. This escalation heralds the birth of a Waaagh. This is not the previously mentioned Gestalt Field, but an amassing of Orks, all led by one massive creature, gathering the many splintered cults and raiding parties into a crusade of pure unadulterated aggression that crashes through a star system and barbaric acts of slaughter. In this environment, York literally thrives, sustaining itself on what some scholars have coined combat nutrition, chemicals and hormones released during combat that provide some form of sustenance. It also allows the greenskin to grow. For the more it fights, the stronger it gets, and the more it wins, the smarter they get. Once a orc has won enough and gets clever enough, they are able to gather the scattered tribes and cults into one loosely united mob. This individual is known as a war boss, or a warlord, should the catastrophe be a sufficient scale. These specimens are terrifying outliers of their species, possessing a cunning and physical mass that dwarfs their kin. Under their singular, iron-fisted command, the unstoppable tide is born, and the galaxy weeps. Whole civilizations are not merely conquered by these tides, they are exterminated, ploughed under by the momentum that ceases only when the last enemy has been rendered into red dust or burnt from the world. Perhaps the most unsettling entry in our archives concerns the terrifying reality of the Greenskins' technology. To the sanctified eyes of the ordained magos of the Adeptus Mechanicus, Orc weaponry is a sacrilegious mockery of the machine god, a collection of rusted plates and jerry-rigged gears and poorly designed mechanisms that should, by every law of physics and logic, be inert. Yet these engines of war function with a terrifying, devastating efficiency. The tech priests hypothesize that the Orc's Gestalt Field exerts a quantum probabilistic influence over reality itself. Because the greenskin expects his weapons to fire, the collective psychic might of the field effectively greasing the gears of causality, forcing the machine to operate through sheer belief. Janitor Lucas Hansen famously noted that many of these devices refuse to operate in human hands. They lack the psychic shadow of the orcoid psyche to give them life. Without the Gestalt Field, none of their machines seem to work. Furthermore, this primitive logic extends beyond the mere function of their machinery and bleeds into a bizarre ritualistic obsession with colour, a chromatic superstition that governs the very psyche of their warfare. It has been observed by numerous regiments in nearly every theatre of war that the Greenskins possess an unwavering faith in the properties of the spectrum. To the Greenskin, colour is far removed from the realm of aesthetics. It is a functional, structural component of the machine itself. They douse their crude plate and unstable munitions with vibrant yellows, driven by a collective, idiotic conviction that this hue signifies immense wealth and status. It is the circular logic of the Orc, that which is flashy and expensive must by necessity be more potent in its capacity for destruction. To the Orc mind, yellow is the herald of the biggest boom. Through the blasphemous alchemy of their Gestalt Field, a shell painted this sun-bright hue, or a slug fired from a yellow-cased weapon, manifests a ferocity that defies all known laws of chemical combustion. It is a terrifying testament to their psychic rot that their munitions possess a greater yield simply because the beast pulling the trigger simply believes his finery demands it. This mania is perhaps most visible in their vehicles. No Orc driver would dream of entering a fray in a vehicle that is not draped in a garish bright red coat, for it is the foundational pillar of their belief that red things simply travel faster. While our own tech priests might scoff at the notion that a coat of pigment can increase the thrust of a combustion engine, the reality on the battlefield is far more harrowing. A Red Orc vehicle frequently outpaces its own technical specifications, hurtling towards our lines with an impossible feverish velocity, fueled by the driver's own fervent belief in the colour red. Most confounding of all, though, is their relationship with the colour purple. There exists amongst the greenskins a pervasive myth that purple is the colour of invisibility. I have here numerous battle reports of almost comedic nature, whereby it's described as orcs painting their massive hulking frames in deep violet pigments, truly believing that they have become one with the shadows. In most instances, these creatures are found standing in open terrain, painfully obvious to any guardsman, and are promptly purged with Vazfire. Some among the Adeptus Mechanicus have attempted to find a rationalisation for this absurdity, theorising that the orcoid eye may be colourblind to that specific frequency, that purple simply does not exist on their visual spectrum, rendering them invisible only to one another. Yet, despite these academic musings, I can find no documented confirmation of their biological quirk. It is more likely we are witnessing the limits of their Gestalt power, illusion so profound that the orc believes he is hidden even as the Emperor's light reveals his hideous form for the world to see. It is a reminder that while their collective will can bend reality to some degree, it is still the mind of the deranged Xenos, governed by logic that is as colourful as it is lethal. It is a tragedy of the highest order that the propaganda reels of the Holy Ordos and the exuberant broadsheets of the Ministorum have both burst a lethal misconception within the hearts of the ruling class. By portraying the greenskins as a merely bumbling brute, a simple dim-witted beast of the field, we have invited a complacency that has claimed more lives than any of this viral plague. To the overly pious and the incredibly naive, the orc is seen as a caricature, a primitive creature whose lack of a refined artifice surely renders him no threat to a civilized, imperial-ruled world. Many a planetary governor, sitting comfortably behind his spire walls, have looked upon the pick captures of rutted orc axes and vulgar firearms with a sneer of aristocratic disdain, believing that the Emperor's walls could never be breached by such clumsy scavengers. This arrogance is a death sentence. The governor fails to comprehend that the orc does not require a sophistication of Amagos to become lethal. He requires only the critical mass of his own kind. When such leaders dismiss a tribal gathering on their frontiers as a matter of local militia or a minor pestilence, they ignore the burgeoning psychic pressure of the Gestalt Field. They see a scavenger. They do not see the seed of an apocalypse. History is littered with the smouldering remains of once prosperous worlds that have fell to the unforeseen and unpredictable invasions of the greenskins. Invasions that were, in truth, entirely predictable. When the tide finally breaks upon the complacent worlds, the governor finds his primitive enemies suddenly wielding weapons that tear through ceramite with impossible ease, and piloting humongous walkers that shrug off last cannon through sheer collected stubbornness. By the time the highborn realises that the greenskin simplicity is in fact a streamlined biological devotion to total war, the captured spires are already toppling. These simple beasts do not need to understand the compact rights of the machine spirit to destroy a world. They need only to believe that they can. Thus, the pious official dies in the ruins of his palace, finally understanding, far too late, that the orc is not a beast to be mocked, but a force of nature to be feared above all others. When a world can no longer contain their teeming millions, the orcs look to the stars with covetous gaze. If no immediate target remains on the planetary surface, they will layer in vast scrapyards to construct hulking monstrosity, vessels of rusted iron and guttering engines. In these space hulks and rocks, they abandon their planet to seek new theatres of slaughter amongst the constellations. Even as their scrap fleets vanish into the cold vacuum, they leave behind a poisoned inheritance. Their spores still saturate the loam, lingering in the hidden corners of worlds in silent gestation. Decades, perhaps centuries may pass. The world is reclaimed by the Imperium, repopulated by the loyal servants of the throne, only for the cycle to reset. Once again, without warning, the throaty roar of the mob will once again drown out the hymns of the faithful. In the final accounting of our galaxy woes, we are forced to confront a terrifying truth that no propaganda reel can obscure and no orbital bombardment can fully erase. The orc is not merely an enemy to be defeated. It is a permanent condition of the universe. While the Eldar fade like dying embers of the fire, and the tyrannid's tendrils are pushed back into the void, the greenskin is in the very soil upon which the theatre of war is built. even as their gargantuan haphazard vessels fire their barely functioning makeshift rocket engines to carry the tide towards unsuspecting systems, they leave behind this poison legacy to ensure their return is a matter of not if, but when. Decades, centuries, millennia may pass, and the threat of the Ork is but a forgotten memory. Yet the cycle is immutable. Eventually the shadows of the deep wilderness will stir, and the inevitable guttering roar of the mob will once again echo across the plains. It is the ultimate tragedy of our 41st millennia that our vigil can never truly end. We are locked in an eternal struggle against the sentient contagion that feeds upon our very resistance. To fight the Ork is to provide it with the combat nutrition it requires to grow. To kill the Ork is to sow the seeds of its successor. We stand as a thin golden line against a viridian apocalypse that has been engineered to outlast time itself. Thus, we do not march towards a final victory, but towards a perpetual holding of the breach. For as long as there is a galaxy to contest, there will be the Greentide, waiting in the spores of the mangled ruin piles and the leftover shacks, ready to remind us that in our dark Imperium there is only the laughter of the 13 gods and the endless mindless thunder of the Ork. Remember, knowledge is power. Guard it well. And so this record may now be sealed in the Emperor's name. To appease the algorithmic machine spirit and ensure it recognises your service, register your credentials or preferred seal in the comments below. Your feedback and support is genuinely appreciated. I would like to extend my never-ending gratitude to my Patreon subscribers, a sentence I never would have thought I would ever get to say. To join those most noble master scholars, visit patreon.com/Historitor Corbe Moore to keep this transmission array running and sacred vellum fresh. Or you can join me on Twitter or TikTok at MoreCorvo. The links, as ever, are in the details below. But our work never ends. Your clearance has been extended to the next prioritised file appearing on your boxcast now. Proceed onwards, dearest listener, for our vigil continues. I shall join you in the next one.